Hello friends, welcome to Homegrown Florida. I'm Katrina. Are you brand new to Florida and you want to garden? Maybe you're a transplant from up north who's moved down here and has loved gardening up north for many years. Or maybe you've been living in Florida for a really long time and you're just brand new to gardening. Well, this video is for you. I'm going to give you 5 tips as to how Florida gardening is different than anything that you have dealt with before. So the number 1 tip of gardening in Florida is all about the seasons. We are currently in the winter season, and if you have noticed, I am wearing a sleeveless shirt because it is hot. It is almost 80 degrees today. In winter in Florida, this is typical. The seasons here in Florida are very different than seasons anywhere else. Most people, especially our friends who moved here from up north, are probably going to say we don't have seasons in Florida. Well, we do have seasons in Florida. They're just very different than what you're used to experiencing or maybe what you've seen on TV. Our seasons here in Florida also occur at different times than what you're used to or maybe what we are told are the seasons for the year. So let's talk about each one of those seasons so that you know the proper time to plant certain vegetables. So since we're in winter, we're going to talk about winter. Winter in Florida is when daytime temperatures usually stay in the 60s and 70s. It is our drought season, so we don't get much rain during the winter season, and our nighttime temperatures range anywhere from, on average, the 40s to the 50s. That is winter for Florida. One of the best ways that I have learned to know that I am technically in winter here in Florida is I look to my fruit trees. So if you have fruit trees, fruit bushes, strawberry plants, they are the ones that are going to tell you that you're in winter. So if you have, I have a peach tree and I have blueberries and blackberries, their leaves change. They don't really fully turn that red. They really stay green. You're not going to have that fall red coloring that occurs, but they will start dropping and they will start looking kind of terrible. And that's what tells me I am in winter here in Florida. The other way that I know is my strawberry plants will start producing. They actually start to produce around late fall. And then they kind of keep producing all the way till we start to enter spring, which is like right now. That is how I know I'm in winter season, and that's how I know I need to be planting cool season crops. Once winter has finished, we start moving into spring. Now, spring, the temperatures during the daytime definitely get into the 80s, and the nighttime temperatures move from the 40s and 50s up to about the 60s. Look to your fruit trees again. So the way that I know that we are entering spring is my peach tree will start to bloom. Also, my blueberries will start to bloom. And that blooming and the start of those leaves forming on those trees is what tells me we are entering spring. And then probably another really big way that you know you're entering spring is pollen. I have a pool, and pollen collects on the top of the water of the pool. It collects on our glass and our windows and everything else on your cars. That is a very clear indicator that you have entered into spring. And spring is a time, along with fall, that we grow our warm season crops and more of the traditional crops that people grow during their summer period times. So your tomatoes, your peppers, your cucumbers, your squashes, those are your warm season crops. Moving into summer, we start getting into the 90s during the day and the 70s and 80s at night. The biggest way that you know that you have entered official summer here in Florida is the bugs. We don't really have summer season, we have bug season. So you're going to see the love bug show up. You're going to see the eastern lubber grasshopper show up. Your plants are going to suddenly become very inundated with bugs, pests. And if you don't spray pesticides like me, I don't spray any pesticides in my garden. Well, I don't spray any non-organic pesticides, and on the rare occasion I do spray with some organic treatments. But there's no point in doing this during summer. I'm telling you right now, you can fight, 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 fight. You are not getting past these bugs. This is their season. They are here to stay. And the best thing you can do is plant tropicals. So this is the time when you should really be focusing on tropical varieties, native varieties of plants that grow during our summers. And they are things like Seminole pumpkins, Everglade tomatoes, long beans, sweet potatoes. Guys, get into sweet potatoes, cowpeas. There are okra. I'm forgetting a few, but there are actual plants that really adore heat, humidity, and bugs. All the plants I mentioned do not even care about the bugs that occur here during the summer, and they produce like crazy. It is insane how much production you can get during the summer. You just have to pick the right varieties. Now, as we move out of the torment that is our summer here in Florida, we move into our fall season. Fall season is very similar to spring season, but it can be a little hard to figure out. And the way that works for me, without a doubt, that I know I could start seeds is I look to my roselle. If you're not growing the Florida cranberry, roselle is a great plant to grow for many reasons. I mean, you can eat the leaves, you can grow the flowers for pretty, you can eat the calyx of the flower as a cranberry substitute. I love these plants. I grow them every year. And the thing that they tell me is when fall begins, because even though we might not be able to tell on the temperature side that it's getting cooler, because that typically doesn't happen very early in fall, what does happen is the roselle plants begin to bloom. And when my roselles bloom, that's when I start my warm season crops, my traditional crops, your tomatoes, your peppers, your cucumbers, your squashes. I start those then. I even start some of the cool weather crops that take a while to grow, like broccoli and cauliflower. I'll start those at that time when those roselles start to bloom, because that tells me that the days are getting shorter and the nights are getting cooler. And that's how I know that it is time to start. The second tip to growing in Florida is all around the seeds. So variety is incredibly important to growing here in Florida. You could technically grow lots of varieties that you could grow up north, but you are going to experience issues, and it's going to break your confidence as a gardener because it's going to be a struggle. So the place that I like to go to get seeds for Florida is the Urban Harvest and FloridaGardening.com. They're local organizations, and pretty much anything that you buy there will work here, depending on the season. Now, if you wanted to buy from bigger places, like this one is in MI Gardener, another really great one that you guys clued me into, I'd heard of it before, but I hadn't bought seeds from it, was Baker's Creek. Love them. They have so much cool stuff for Florida. The Johnny Seeds is a good one, as long as you know what you're looking for. And then one that I really like is a Southern Seed Exchange. They're more for southern states in the United States, more like southeastern states in the United States. And you kind of need to be careful with any of these seed companies, because southern states are not the same thing as a Florida state. Getting something that grows in Georgia will probably still grow here. You're still going to have some struggles. And if you want your first gardening year to be successful, you really need to be focusing on the stuff that actually is designed or encouraged that grows here. The UF website is a great resource. They have a great agricultural department and extension offices that will answer your questions and help you get the help that you need in transitioning from growing up north to growing down here, where it's very different. You need to be finding plants that love heat, that love humidity, and that don't mind bugs. There's not a whole lot out there, but they are out there. Let me tell you about what to look for in a seed packet variety. Flip around to the back of the description. You're going to want to, number one, look for the origin. Pretty much your Southeast Asian varieties are very good. Indian varieties or India varieties are very good for here because of the similarities in our climate. Then things in southern Georgia or other areas of Florida would work here as well. Other things you need to be looking for on these seed packet descriptions are words like heat tolerant or loves humidity or something to that effect. And slow to bolt is not the same thing as heat tolerant, so be careful with that. Slow to bolt can also be based on the number of days of, or the number of hours of sunlight in a day, which is not a huge concern here in Florida. We go from maybe 9 hours of daylight to, I don't know, 12 hours of daylight a day. It's not a big variance. Heat resistance is a key indicator that you're going to want to look for. Other things that you want to look for are disease resistance, particularly diseases, fungal diseases. We have a significant amount of rain during our late spring, well, not even late spring, more like summer into fall where it gets more sporadic. That immense amount of rain that we have that occurs every day during those seasons, it's almost like you could put your watch to it. You know, you could say, oh, at 3 o'clock we're going to get a rainstorm. You get them every day. And I know if you've been a gardener up north, they talk about don't wet the leaves of tomato plants or cucumber plants because it will encourage disease. Yeah, that happens. Down here we get a lot of disease, and you need to just be ready that it's not a matter of if you're going to get a fungal disease. It's a matter of how quickly you can grow that plant to outrun the fungal disease. And one of the best ways of outrunning it is to find a disease resistance variety, so that way you get the most amount of time with that plant. And then last but not least, you want fast maturing. The longer a plant is in the ground here, the more opportunity it has to have disease, to allow the bugs to get at it, and to enter into very hot weather. And there's very few plants that really love the hot weather. And those are the ones that I mentioned that you can grow during the summer, which are tropicals. So fast maturing is an important characteristic that you're looking for. If you are finding this video helpful, make sure to go down and hit the like button. This is a great indicator for me to know whether this is the type of content that you guys want to see. And I only want to be making content that you enjoy and find helpful. Our number 3 tip today is all around bugs. Oh man, bugs in Florida are pretty extreme. And it's mainly because we don't have a winter that eradicates them. We have a nice cool winter and you can grow some cool season crops, but we don't have a winter that is going to kill off bugs and kill off eggs. They are here pretty much all year round. They do go a little bit dormant during the winter, so that is a great time to grow when you're not going to be experiencing a bunch of bugs. But spring, fall, they all wake up or they start to slow down if it's fall. Summer, they are out with a vengeance. They have a bone to pick with you. The plants are decimated. Like bugs are a problem. Bugs are a problem. Now, you can try to fight them with pesticides, whether that be organic or non-organic, and you are going to fail. I would love to say that I know gardeners who have won this battle with bugs, but I have not. And I have been gardening for a number of years in multiple locations here in Florida, and I have not won going that route. The only route that I have gone that has worked is not doing anything. I know that sounds crazy. It's crazy. You're like, Patrina, they're going to like eat everything. And they do. They do. They eat everything. Now, there are some cool things that you can do to bring down your pest pressure. First and foremost, grow during the appropriate seasons. Second, grow companion plant. You know, when I got into companion planting, it was like such this huge thing to try to learn. And I boiled it down to the simplest form here. Onions, garlic, leeks, and herbs. If you grow any of those around a plant that has bug issues, you're gonna get a reprieve. So in this bed right here, I have some garlic. I'm sorry, this is onions. I have some onions. I have garlic, and way back there in the corner, you can barely see it, I have parsley. I pepper in herbs that I don't even eat on a regular basis in between my plants. Like, I'm not a real big dill person. The only thing that I put dill in is my pickles, but I don't need a huge amount of dill. But I grow a huge amount of dill because growing dill in between your cabbage plants will keep the cabbage moth away, and it works fairly well. Putting garlic and onions in between your plants works pretty well to keep stuff away. Putting basil next to your tomatoes keeps bugs away. Putting chives next to your peppers keeps bugs away. Peppers are usually not that impacted by bugs anyway, but you get where I'm going with this. Interplant herbs amongst your other plants, and it will help decrease your bugs, even during summer. So onions are not something that really grows well during the summer, but green onions, you can grow them pretty much all year round here in Florida. Second, keep it neat. Keep your beds neat. I'm not necessarily talking about weeds, although, you know, if you have an overgrowth of weeds, that's a place where bugs can hang out. But take away anything that is dead material or, you know, plant material that has died off, like the lower leaves. Get rid of that stuff. If you have a tomato plant that has a lot of blight happening on the bottom half, cut those leaves up. Get those off, get them out of the beds. Don't just throw them back into the beds. There is something called chop and drop, and you can do that. Just know that you're giving the bugs a place to live and enjoy. And I mean, after a while, like me, you just give up. You're just like, give them a home, it's fine. But by keeping the understory of your bed clean and neat, it gives them less of a place to live. Next, don't spray. Oh, man, I hate to even say this because I know there's going to be folks out here like, oh, I can't get rid of them. You know, I have to spray. And you will get rid of them if you spray for a very brief period of time. But you're also getting rid of every other bug that's good. There are good bugs, and I have seen it and experienced it. And there are really great bugs out there that help you with feeding the soil, and it helps you with killing off the aphids. And when you put out something like 7, or there's lots of other kinds, but when you, even organic pesticides, when you spray neem through the whole garden, you're essentially pushing all bugs out. Good bugs are actually harder to find than bad bugs. Bad bugs, they're a dime a dozen. There's tons of them throughout the whole garden. The good bugs, they don't show up right away. So if you want to take this approach, I want to prepare you that your next season, or even 2, the good bugs take a little while to show up. So you're going to have quite a bit of loss that first season. But once that is over with, once that amount of loss is over with, the good bugs show up and they stay. They stay and they produce babies, and those babies have places to live inside of your plants and in your little ecosystem that you have here. And they are the best pest preventative. Well, not preventative, because they get rid of them. Okay. You know where I'm going with this. They are your workers, and you don't even need a lot of them. I mean, I can walk through the garden and I can see bad bugs every single day. And then, you know, a couple times a week, I see the good ones. And I'm like, hey guys, and I talk to them, including the bees. And, but they are doing so much work behind the scenes, and you don't really need a lot of them. So don't be discouraged if you don't see them, number one, or if you're losing a lot of plants in that first season or 2, because it takes them a little while to show up. But once they show up, and once they've deemed that this is a great place to live, and they start making their babies here and putting down their eggs, they will be here for forever, as long as you don't spray anything. Sometimes you may have pest pressure in your garden that just is not, it's not working, and you really want to grow this one thing. So if you need to use stuff, use some organic stuff first. Start with the least destructive before you move on to the most destructive, so that way you're not killing off the entire ecosystem. You're being very targeted. And then that way, the rest of your garden maintains an ecosystem. The 4th tip for growing here in Florida is all around disease prevention. So we did talk about growing in the right season. We talked about disease-resistant varieties. Now we're going to talk about how you treat diseases, and you are going to have diseases. you are going to have fungal diseases. The way that I like to treat is using a peroxide water spray, which is what I have right here. And it is, I write it on here, okay, 10 tablespoons of peroxide to fill this entire thing, which I believe is a gallon. Now, you want to work your way up to that. So maybe start with 5 tablespoons to your water. And I only spray this on the plants that need it, which is typically tomatoes, cucumbers, squashes, melons. That's where you're going to see the most amount of fungal issues. And I will spray it once a week during that spring to fall season. We almost never have issues from winter into spring because we don't get a lot of rain. We do still have a significant amount of humidity, but it's not as bad. It's probably more like what you would experience up north. But during late spring all the way into fall, we get immense amount of rain. And I mean, 100% humidity is not a big, it's not uncommon. It's actually very common. You walk outside and it feels like you walked straight into a sauna. And our plants feel that and they get a lot of disease because of it. So the peroxide water spray helps me as a preventative. There are other preventative options that I have used in the past. A copper fungicide was something I used in the past, but with the excessive amount of fungal issues we have here in Florida, I found myself spraying that every single week. And there are some studies out there that talk about the copper accumulating in the soil, and it can be detrimental to plants. So I wanted to move away from that onto something else. The other way to get control of it is to clip the leaves off that plant. I have plants that look basically bare because I had to clip off a ton of powdery mildew. And that's okay. They bounce back from that. So clip those leaves off. Don't wait. Don't wait for those leaves to get crazy. Clip them off early and get them out of the garden. Do not compost those. Get them in your trash or burn pile or whatever. Just get rid of them. Get them out of the garden. Another thing that you're really going to want to do with those particular plants that I mentioned is succession planting. Now, I know I see it up north. I love you guys. I love watching you guys' garden up north. You have these huge zucchini plants that look beautiful and they are producing hundreds in one season. Yeah, that doesn't happen here. I mean, it does, but it doesn't, right? So what you really need down here is to succession plant those. You need to succession plant things you wouldn't think you need to succession plant, like tomatoes, which should grow through the whole season, but it takes nothing for those to get hit with a really bad bout of fungal issue that they will decline very quickly. And if you don't have a plant to put in its place after it has succumbed to its illness, you are just going to be chasing the season, trying to get a harvest. You're going to be growing a plant to its adult stage. It'll have immature fruit and then it dies off. And you're like, I grew that plant for that whole season and I didn't get anything. Succession plants. Always be succession planting. I mentioned this before in an older video that even if those plants that I start a bunch in trays. I always have plants in trays. Even if I end up never putting those in the ground, it is a comforting backup plan for when something goes wrong. Now our 5th tip, I've saved the best for last. This is the #1 way that growing in Florida is different than growing anywhere else in the country. And that is our soil. You see, I have a lot of raised bed and I have my soil right here. I'm going to show you some. Look at that. It's dark. It's black. When I clump it, it kind of stays clumped. Now this bed I've been drying out because I had a pretty extreme dollarweed issue, but look at that. It clumps together. It's good soil, right? That is not what Florida soil looks like. I've been working on this soil. Let me show you what Florida soil actually looks like. All right, guys. This, I dug down a little bit because I have a good top layer. This is what Florida soil looks like. You see that? Not very dark. It does stick together a little bit. But you know what it's mostly? Sand. That is sand. That is wet sand. And you can see based on the color that there is a very different texture. It doesn't clump together. It definitely feels like sand. It looks like sand. Trust me, it's sand. So why is sand such a bad thing? Well, if you remember from your gardening days up north, you might add perlite, vermiculite, or sand to your mix to add drainage. Well, since most of Florida, not all, but most of Florida has extreme sandy soil, it drains great. And let me tell you that it is good that we have sandy soil in Florida. It's important for Florida to have sandy soil. And the reason for that is because we get hurricanes and we get floods and we get rain every single day. So if we didn't have sand, the whole state would be like a complete mud field and it would not drain like it does. So in that respect, it's good that Florida has lots of sand. It's bad because that drainage property that sand has is also a property that flushes out nutrients. So if you're going to do in-ground growing, you're going to have to amend that soil. There are plants that grow in sand. Trust me, there's a ton of natives that absolutely love it down here in Florida and love the sandy soil and are able to get whatever nutrients out of it, that very little amount that's in there. But traditional vegetables that we eat from the grocery store, they do require some amendments. They require some organic material. They want to eat something in the soil, and sand is almost devoid of that material. So we have to figure out how to grow here those things that don't necessarily typically grow down here. And the way that we do that is by adding organic material. So in this bed, for example, I'll put a link to a video up here that shows how I fill these beds with nothing but organic material. Wood chips are a really great source for creating organic material. Compost is a really great resource to build organic material. We have lots of grass here in Florida and lots of green plants all year round. Anything that was alive that was not sprayed with a pesticide or herbicide are great organic materials that you can add to your garden. Just chop it down small, lay it on top. I like to do it in a method of mulching with it. So I will take grass clippings or leaf litter or dead plant material, and as long as it's not fungal issues impacting it, and I will chop it up and I will lay it down as a mulch, and then keep adding layers of organic material. Always be adding layers. It will eventually break down underneath that top layer and create soil, like beautiful, dark, usable soil. I use a raised bed approach because it confines and contains all the good things that I'm doing into that space. And I can do it 12 inches high or even higher if you have a more raised bed. And it contains all that good nutrition to a certain space. Now, if you want to grow in ground, you just need to do this on mounds above ground. Another great thing that you can do to help build up the soil are amendments. So there are amendments that you can buy. If you're into that, you can buy amendments and add them. I usually will buy blood meal, bone meal, and kelp meal. And instead of getting kelp meal like I do, you can head over to the beach every once in a while and pick up some seaweed and take that seaweed and lay it on top of your bed like a mulch, and that will feed the soil too. Those are great amendments for the soil. You also maybe want to encourage worms. I get a crazy amount of earthworms in my bed, which is awesome. And they're fat and they're huge. They're like this long and they're like the size of a pencil around, and they kind of leap out sometimes. Freaks me out, but I love them. And I think the way that I really encourage them is on the bottom of all my beds is cardboard, and they love cardboard. If you've already created your beds, burying some cardboard will bring them in. For some reason, they like it. Burying vegetable scraps will bring them in as well. Giving them something to eat while they're here will encourage them to stay. And you want those worms because when those worms are traveling around and eating that cardboard and eating those vegetable scraps, they are pooping. They are pooping, and that is what we call worm castings. And worm castings is just worm poop. And the poop is similar to if you put chicken litter or cow manure into your beds. Has lots of nitrogen and lots of organic material that the plants like to eat. Ground covers encourage healthy soil. So something like sun hemp or cowpeas. Up north, they use like a winter rye, uh, different kinds of peas and stuff like that. Down here, we do it, but we don't do it in like fall, spring, or winter. We do it in summer. Summer is the best time to put down a cover crop that will help feed your soil. Cowpeas are like the easiest way to feed your soil. You can go into the grocery store down that bean aisle that has all the dry beans in bags and get you some black-eyed peas and just toss them in here during the summer. If you don't want to garden during the summer, cool. Drop some black-eyed peas in your beds. The plants will grow before they form the flowers, or right when the flowers start to form. Take a weed eater and just cut them down and let it fall right back in. Let it regrow, cut it down, fall right back in. All of that is going to create two things for you. It's going to create biomass, and that's just a fancy word for saying mass. It's going to refill these beds because they do sink a lot because of the sand underneath. The other thing it creates is nitrogen. Beans, cowpeas, for example, they push nitrogen down into the soil. Now, the trick to remember here is not to allow them to flower and produce, because once they flower and produce, they start taking back that nitrogen to produce the food. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today. I hope this was helpful for you, especially if you are a transplant from up north or brand new to gardening in Florida. Everything here is a little bit different, but completely possible. Get in there and start that garden. I'll see you next time.